In today's video, we're going to have another edition of what we call Sign and Trade, where we take a look at some NHL trade rumors and examine 3 NHL players, with the teams today being the Ducks, the Sharks, and the Sabres. Should these players be signed to extensions or traded? We'll jump into all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're looking at some trade rumors involving 3 teams, and we're going to examine 3 players and whether or not they should be signed and extended or traded to another organization. Now, before we jump into that, one other quick piece of news I wanted to tag on to today's video. I meant to mention yesterday, but with all the other news going on yesterday, kind of slipped out of the video. The Carolina Hurricanes have signed a 10-year lease agreement extension with PNC Arena, so there's just a further evidence there that they're not going anywhere. Obviously, since new owner Tom Dundon has come in, that team has been revived drastically. Obviously, last year's playoff run helped considerably as well. Attendance was up much more this year, and those season ticket holders were up. Everything seems to be improving in the right direction there. I know one point a few years back, they were often looked upon as being a potential relocation team, and that's certainly no longer the case. They won't be going anywhere anytime soon. I know with everything going on with the NHL pause and the pandemic, all NHL teams are certainly suffering losses, and it wouldn't be shocking, maybe some other teams at the end of all this might end up in worse situations than the Hurricanes ever were in. And as far as teams relocating, that's really difficult to say at this point in time. I'm not sure there's really any we can say that are really close to that happening. But like I said, once we get through this pause, through this pandemic, there could be teams that are suffering financial losses that might have to consider that. But that's a discussion for another day. Either way, the Hurricanes are staying in Carolina for at least another decade, if not more. So let's jump in here to today's video, where we look at 3 players and analyze whether or not they should be signed and extended, or should the teams that they're with now consider trading them. Let's get started off with the San Jose Sharks. We're focusing today again on the 7 teams that are non-playoff teams. Obviously, they're able to make more moves right now than the other teams, and there's certainly a lot more talk amongst NHL writers and reporters out there on what they might be considering to do, since they're already in planning stages of their offseason, where other teams are kind of probably more likely to see how things play out with their potential playoff hopes before they get too deep into making plans. Now, the Sharks, though, the player we're looking at is Kevin Labanc. Now, Labanc's a player who's had some rumors around him recently. Not so much a lot of talk that he's definitely going to be moved or anything like that, but I know it's been brought up in numerous articles about the possibility of the Sharks looking to improve their goaltending in defense, and whether or not he or a guy like Thomas Hertl would be worth considering to be trade bait. I know amongst NHL reporters that have covered this, many felt Labanc at least was more likely to be traded than Hertl, although I really don't think anybody out there is saying that he should be or will be traded. It's just one of the options when you look at their roster. He's an RFA. Sometimes when you get players on expiring contracts, that's when you really need to analyze their value to your team longer term. And many feel that Thomas Hertl is more of an established piece of the longer term solution and core players in San Jose. He's got a pretty good contract, so there's a few years left. Although he has had some injury problems the last few years. I mean, he has had some pretty serious knee injuries, so I guess we'll see how much that'll impact his long-term viability. But Labanc's a player who can certainly be a top 6 forward, but certainly at times can play lower in the lineup as well. And obviously this past year, he took a 1-year deal at $1 million, which many felt was a big-time steal, but then his production dropped down significantly. At the end of his 3-year entry-level contract, he put up 56 points, but then only responded last year with 33 points, had 70 games played when the NHL season was paused. So he's been proven to be a pretty durable player, doesn't miss a lot of time. Like I said, his production did slip a lot this past year, but based on the prior year and the fact that he gave the Sharks a big-time discount, I think it's fair to say that they already had some sort of handshake agreement or verbal agreement in place with the general manager there, Doug Wilson, where they likely would be offering him a longer-term contract with more money that would be more suitable, and maybe they'd be willing to overpay a little bit now to make up for what he didn't make last year. That's just an assumption on my part, but I know that's an assumption a lot of people made when his current contract is expiring, was originally announced last year. So with Kevin Labanc, you have to look at the fact that they have several other players locked up longer term, including Captain Logan Couture, they could be Evander Kane, as I mentioned, Thomas Hertl, Timo Meyer's also a big part of their future. Obviously, you don't want to have too many forwards making too much money. You have to spread things out. They got some big time money on the blue line between Vlasic, Burns, and Karlsson. Martin Jones is making a decent amount of money for a goalie who's been struggling and inconsistent. They need to address other areas of the team. And Labanc's a player, when I was looking at making this video, I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, I do see the value in keeping him, because if you look at their top six, he can certainly be a valuable piece there, depending on what he's willing to accept for a contract, of course. But at the same time, they desperately need help in goal. Aaron Dell likely has gone via free agency. Jones has been inconsistent. If you look at the free agent market, there are some interesting options that they could consider. Amongst all free agent options for goalies, I think one of the ones that would make the most sense if they can would bring back former Shark and current Islander Thomas Greiss. I think he would be able to push Jones a little bit more and challenge him and play more of a starting role if Jones continued to struggle, at least on a shorter-term basis. Like I said, they did sign Russian goalie Alexei Melnichuk, but not quite clear if he's going to be able to jump in and be a starter or a solid backup right away. Does he need time in the minors? You need some insurance there in that situation, and Labanc could be the guy to go ahead and get that. Or maybe they get multiple pieces coming back to help build for their future, and a little bit now and a little bit for later, because even though that blue line has 3 big-time contracts, they need to fill up the rest of that, and they do have some pieces there that could work. But maybe they could look at getting a combination of either a backup goalie and a defense, or maybe build up some draft picks, because they certainly have not having the first-round pick this year is going to hurt in the draft, and obviously a time to possibly consider making a trade would be at a draft. Maybe they could get a high draft pick, whether it be a couple of second rounders or even a first rounder possibly. I'm not sure if they could garner that kind of return for Labanc, but if anybody out there is willing to pay that, it's certainly something that you need to consider for sure. So really, like I said, I'm kind of torn in this situation. I'd love to know what you guys think. Should the Sharks sign Labanc? Although a lot of it's going to depend on the contract, I'd be a little hesitant to do yet another long-term big money contract because of all the other ones you have, and clearly the team is really not in great shape overall, having a bad year. Some feel this team needs to go through more of a rebuild, whereas others feel it's more of a retool. They're highly rumored to bring back Thornton and Marlowe yet again. Like I said, they have all these other long-term deals. Do they really need another one with Labanc, or should they consider if maybe doing a short-term contract, and if they can't come to terms on that, do they consider using him as the piece of the trade bait here to garner another option like a goalie, for example? So let me know what your thoughts are. I'm kind of on the fence myself, and we'll see what everybody else thinks in the comment section. Now, next up, we're going to take a look at Buffalo Sabres goaltender Linus Ullmark. Now, Ullmark's been with the organization for some time. Many have called him the goalie of the future off and on really for quite a long time now, and he's really yet to really grab the bull by the horns here and take that starting role, although he was starting to do that this year before the NHL season was paused. His numbers this year are some of the best numbers he's put up during his time so far in the NHL. He's still only 26 years old. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, so he's a great, good-sized goalie. He's from Sweden. He's certainly had a lot of things that look good about him being that guy for the future. I mean, they brought in Carter Hutton, who was pretty much a career backup before going to Buffalo 2 years ago, and his numbers have been kind of up and down as well. He's really never followed up the starting role with Buffalo like he did with his backup numbers when he was platooning with St. Louis. This year, Ullmark played 34 games, put up a .915 save percentage, and a 2.69 goals against average. So considering the team that's in front of them, and it wasn't overly strong defensively, and they were not having a great season, those numbers are actually pretty decent. So personally, I think a lot of goalies do take longer to come into their own. They develop at a whole different rate. Usually they are 25, 26 years old before they start, seeing regular NHL duties as starter and really seeing a lot more success. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, but traditionally, if you look back at the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of goalies have, entered the league much later, usually 5, 6, 7 years sometimes before they're from the time they're drafted to the time that they're a full-fledged starting NHL goalie. There's different paths for all, but clearly they're a unique specimen that develops at a whole different rate, just like defensemen, forwards. They're all different and unique to what they go through to becoming regular NHL stars. But in my opinion, right now, they do have another prospect goalie in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who could be the goalie of the future, but he's battled through some injuries. He needs more time as well before you really know what you have there. So given the uncertainty of the goaltending depth of the organization, I'm not really sure they can afford to go through another situation where they don't keep Ullmark and start fresh again somewhere else. So in my opinion, I think they should sign Ullmark, but of course, Given the numbers, I don't think they should commit anything too long-term as of yet. I still think a bridge deal is appropriate in this case, 2 or 3 year contract and a reasonable amount of money. I don't really think he's learned a 7 or 8 year deal. I mean, yes, he was having a good year this year, better than the other 3 as he completed his ELC before, but still, I think it's too soon to commit longer term. I mean, they've already gone through having Robin Lehner in Buffalo before, and he ended up leaving. Lehner could have been that guy, but of course, there was a lot of other personal stuff going on with him, which certainly impacted his level of success. But Jason Botterill as a GM's got a lot to do to improve the team in front of the goalie as well. And if they can get their defense playing better and have their forwards playing better on both ends of the ice, that certainly will impact the goalie statistics and the win-loss column for all associated here for the Sabres. They need to change the whole culture here, and really the last couple of years we haven't seen enough of that. We've seen a lot of voice and concerns from Captain Jack Eichel and others that are really tired of the losing. They're fed up. They want to see some change, and it starts with having Allmark at least be that consistent piece in the net. If he will agree to, that mid-range contract, nothing too short, nothing too long, reasonable amount of money, but I do see him as being the goaltender of the present, at least for the foreseeable future. If you can improve the team in front of him, you might have something there. And he said, hopefully in a few years' time, you've got Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen working his way up to be the backup goalie and eventually take over from Allmark down the road. Now, lastly here, I want to take a look at a pending UFA, and that's Anaheim Ducks captain Ryan Getzlaf. Now, the Ducks are in a unique situation where Bob Murray has certainly started a bit of a rebuild, retool. Not really clear exactly what direction they're going in. You can call it one or the other, but personally, I think they need more of a rebuild and to allow more of their youngsters to take on bigger roles and start building from the ground up there. And they have a lot of good pieces to work with. And Ryan Getzlaf, like I said, has been there a long time. He's been captain for a long time. He's certainly come in many years ago. He's played over 1,000 games with the Ducks. He is close to 1,000 points. It would be nice to see him hit that 1,000-point plateau, which he very well could do. He's going to have one more year left on his contract, and I don't see a trade happening imminently with him, although it would be a possibility that he could be traded before the beginning of the following season. But I think it's more likely that he goes into that final year of his deal and becomes a trade deadline acquisition for the trade deadline for the 2020-2021 season. Clearly, he's got an $8.25 million cap hit, which might concern some teams, but with some salary retention, with only a portion of the season remaining, that would become a lot less of a concern, and Getzlaf could become a valuable piece to many other teams entering a playoff run. Clearly, he's got a ton of experience, has won a Stanley Cup before, great leader, been a tremendous player, but at the same time, you got to look at the fact that the last 3 years, he's come nowhere close to playing a full season. He's missed over 50 games in the last 3 years. His body's breaking down. He's battled a lot of injuries, but his production has still been decent. But I think it may be time to put the C on another player after one more year. Trade him, see what you can get back to kind of build for the future. So they got a lot of good pieces involved. You do need some veterans to go through a rebuild, but they have other guys like a good goalie and John Gibson, who's also a good leader in the room, young enough on a long-term deal. You got Cam Fowler on defense. You got Adam Henrique, Jakob Silverberg, etc. Perhaps Rickard Rakell sticks around too. They do have some other pieces there who can take on that role and let Getzlaf move on. So personally, I think he should be traded before the end of the contract, recoup what you can, and move in a new direction. He'll be 30. He's 35 now. He'll be 36 going into that last year. Time that he could be traded, or that would make the most sense. Instead, a team could opt to make the move sooner so they have a full year of him in their lineup. But even if that doesn't happen, a trade deadline acquisition to me makes a ton of sense and really go to a changing of the guard here as this team goes through more of a rebuild, and have general manager Bob Murray really allow his younger prospect kids to take on bigger roles and help this team move further into the future in a new direction. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Are these players, which ones should be signed? Who should be traded? What directions do these teams go in? And we can discuss further down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.